So, I would like to sort of jump in and learn what how do you think of the blockchain ecosystem now as it relates to platforms? Because each of you sort of made your career in building epic platforms that everybody in this room uses. And I'm curious to know, how do you see blockchains and the evolution of internet platforms?
I can go first.
Go ahead.
What's really exciting about blockchain is that it makes the possibility of platforms even bigger and wider. So when you look at a platform like LinkedIn, it's really kind of a one application. And there's a lot of projects now that are focused on building protocols where that's an underlying layer to many more applications. And so you can kind of think of it as the possibility of a super platform on which many different applications can rely on many different domains. And so it opens up the opportunity for even sort of larger swaths of applicability, and also the possibility of creating something that has way more value than even kind of these application platforms as we know them today is that much greater.
I would say the fact that decentralization is built into the blockchain concept basically makes it possible, perhaps, to do things that people were trying to do with old peer-to-peer networks that ultimately were centralized and therefore did have a single neck to chop off, essentially. But a blockchain living on several completely independent nodes and that actually owned, it's not Napster, which you can just shut down, right? Actually owned by the participants enables a lot of the dreams that many of us had for truly decentralized communities. That's the way Wikipedia should have been. But of course, a wiki is just a website that has to live on a single server or connected servers.
So we're in this really transition period. We have been for maybe the last sort of 5 years, and we're at the beginning of the knee of the curve, in terms of blockchain technologies getting out into the mainstream. So maybe touch on, when did you know, or when did you become a believer that blockchain technologies would be indeed the future of this dream that you had in the past with sort of mesh networking and P2P networks?
So I had just been hearing now and then about blockchain until last September. I knew it was something that I should study more and that it was cool. And I read a couple of articles and said, wow, this sounds like, they might really be onto something. And then I developed an idea for a sort of decentralized database of encyclopedia articles. And I described that idea to the Everipedia guys, who have already built a fork of Wikipedia, which is quite successful. And basically they said, we think we can actually implement your idea on the blockchain. So do you want to join us? And so that's when I really started studying it, and I realized that unlike so many people who get into blockchain and crypto stuff just in order to get rich, it actually is a technology that solves a problem that I've had for a long time. So.
And how would you sum up that problem, actually?
Basically motivating people to trust that their work on a community project isn't going to be co-opted by a single central player against their wishes. That's the basic idea. So it has to be really robustly decentralized.
Excellent. And what about you, Eric?
Yeah, my journey was really started last year as well, and I certainly heard about blockchain and Bitcoin, but as I started reading more and more and talking to people, in the community, I really came to realize that there was a really exciting set of concepts that all kind of came together, around technology and fintech and also kind of governance issues, and it was all kind of unified in this you talk about tokens and so forth, and it was just an amazing set of concepts put together by some really smart people, and I got really excited about the possibilities of taking these new ideas and doing something interesting with it. And I have to say that the last time that I felt kind of this level of excitement was in the late '90s when the first internet came, and again, kind of a very similar set of new ideas and the possibilities that are filled with using those technologies.
That's interesting. And so comparing it to that time period, right? Are there any differences? What are the similarities and the differences that you notice in terms of when the internet was going through that transition from being something only kids at Stanford did, to something that the entire world was going to use?
Well, of course, back then, very few people knew about the internet. It was mainly in research institutions and the military. And as consumers, we've all benefited from that. And now with blockchain and crypto, there's a basis on which to go forward. So some of the problems, some of the opportunities that blockchain presents, I would say reach deeper. I'm very intrigued by this idea of the Internet of Value, which is what blockchain represents, and a whole lot more possibilities around kind of deepening the use of the internet.
And what about you, Larry? What are some of the similarities and differences?
The differences to me really stand out, actually. I remember right around 2006, 2007, when Facebook, well, YouTube, then Facebook, then Twitter, all just started really taking off. And the whole Web 2.0 thing started, and it was surprising. Right before my eyes, the internet was changing, basically. Throughout the 90s and the first half of the aughts, the internet was all about individuals interfacing with each other in loosely connected, decentralized, groups that people would form and leave, and it was much smaller. We all, dreamed, wow, what would it be like if everybody got on board? And yeah, well,
it would be like Wikipedia and LinkedIn.
It'd be like Facebook today, basically. I mean, it's just. Yeah, and now it's so many decisions are made essentially. I can set up a discussion group about philosophy, and if I don't have access to some corporate megaphone to really get the word out, not very many people are ever going to hear about it. That's despite there being an order of magnitude more people online than there were back in the 1990s. Back in the 1990s, I would have been able to get more people on it because basically the giants sort of suck the air. So I view it as being not as free, basically.
Interesting. So Eric, I know that you're working on a project called Hub Token. So tell us a little bit about how you're transitioning into that new venture.
Yeah. So the main problem that we're addressing is something that Larry brought up about the size of the internet as it exists today and the number of people who are on it, and it's really grown from kind of a small community to a global set of users, and so within that, trust is a topic that we are very concerned with, especially when people are coming into contact with each other for the first time. We call them strangers. They're trying to interact, share information, and they are also trying to engage in transactions. And so how do you understand the trustworthiness of people that you're interacting with or transacting with for the first time? So what we're developing is a protocol around trust and reputation. It's sort of a new layer. We like to think of it for the internet, where it's basically a distributed database of reputation data for all kinds. And what's interesting for me is that from LinkedIn days, we were already kind of moving from a centralized model of user information to a slightly more decentralized version of user information, namely that people own their own profile on the platform. But you still had this idea of people or the company owning that data. And the opportunity with blockchain is to really go one step further and say, people can have their own reputation data. They can store it in a decentralized format, and they can really control it and own it. And we believe that's not only making it more extreme, but also opens up kind of new economic opportunities for those users by having them be able to control their own reputation data.
It's absolutely huge. I mean, people owning their own data, this is one of the biggest complaints about social networks and social media today is, why is it that I'm the person producing the content and I'm the one with the network, and yet the company is the one making all the money off of my content and my friends? So this is a huge, part of the evolution. So Larry, for you, you're basically doing another Wikipedia. You're upgrading it, or tell us about Everipedia and the work you're doing there.
So it's not me. I've joined a company that has been around since the 2015 Everipedia. I started advising them a few months after they got started. And Everipedia is a fork of Wikipedia. They call themselves, we call ourselves, the Encyclopedia of Everything. So one of the differences with Wikipedia is that we make no restrictions on the topics. I have an article about my left thumb, which I wrote to demonstrate that it is possible.
Sounds fascinating.
And that's one of the big differences. Another is that there's a WYSIWYG interface, which Wikipedia has tried to build, but these guys, fresh out of UCLA, built in a space of a few months, apparently. And yeah, they're really good. I'm actually proud to join them. And they got me on board because, well, actually for reasons I was explaining before, that by moving to the blockchain, it's going to make it possible to organize all the world's encyclopedia articles, putting, if not the articles themselves, then links to the articles, and then inviting the world to rate all of the articles. And if we are sharing information about ourselves, perhaps using a system like Eric's, then we will be able to slice and dice the rating data, and you'll be able to compare what the top rated article is according to French feminists versus, Texas men or whatever, all kinds of different things. There's not just politics, religion, and it'll be very interesting to see, well, anyway, I think I've talked enough about it. You get the idea, I think.
Sure, it's the future. So maybe just to sum up, we got about a minute left, but where do you see blockchain going, into the future now that we're here at the knee of the curve?
It's really hard to tell, right? It's such a new technology, but I've kind of drunk the Kool-Aid, so I actually think it is going to take over a lot of industries. It might take some time, and it's hard to say who's going to win and who's going to lose in the long run, but I think that there is an excellent chance that it's going to revolutionize a lot of them. So.
I drank the Kool-Aid as well, and I believe that about 5 years from now, although things might happen much more quickly with this technology cycle, a lot of people will be benefiting from blockchain technology maybe even without knowing it. And I think that's really, where the answer should lie. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We're making more Kool-Aid in the back, and so feel free to help yourself.
Please give a warm thank you for our two guests.